I thought my life was perfect, especially with my wife by my side. But as everything was falling apart, I discovered the truth about her secret plans with someone else. Everything I knew was shattered in an instant. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to dive into a story full of tension and unexpected twists. This story follows a man named Ryan, who had to face betrayal and harsh challenges in his marriage. Emily, the wife he trusted for so many years, secretly planned their divorce, not only to end their relationship but to take everything he had built. Have you ever experienced the feeling of being betrayed and not knowing who to trust around you? Stay tuned to see how Ryan overcame these difficulties and whether he was able to get everything he lost back. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to support me. And help me reach 1,000 subscribers soon so I can keep bringing you more interesting stories like this. Thank you so much, and let's get started with the story now. My name is Ryan, and I never thought I'd be telling a story like this. It feels strange to even talk about, let alone share it publicly. But here I am, trying to make sense of everything that has happened. I've spent months questioning what I did wrong, but in the end, I think I've finally figured it out. It started like any other typical day. I was living a comfortable, predictable life with my wife, Emily. We had been together for nearly 7 years, married for 5. We were that couple that seemed to have it all long. Deep conversations about everything under the sun, spontaneous date nights, and vacations to places we both loved. But little did I know, behind the scenes, things were changing. About 6 months ago, Emily started acting differently. At first, I thought I was just overthinking it. But as time went on, I couldn't ignore it. The first clue was her phone. She'd never been obsessed with it before, but now she carried it everywhere, whether she was just going to the kitchen or folding laundry. I laughed it off, asking if she was running some secret operation, and she chuckled, brushing it off as work-related stress. But then things got weird. She started setting a password on her phone, something she'd never done before. When I asked about it, she said something vague about keeping things secure from hackers. It seemed innocent enough, but something about it felt off. A few days later, I started noticing her sneaking off to take calls. She'd leave the room suddenly, saying, "I'll be right back," and disappear into the bedroom or outside. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe it was just work, but the secrecy was starting to get to me. One afternoon, I ran into her outside a cafe. She wasn't with a friend, like she'd told me. Instead, she was pacing, her phone glued to her ear. From where I stood, I overheard parts of her conversation. Words like "fresh start" and "almost ready" made my stomach drop. I couldn't make out everything, but it was clear this was more than just a casual chat. Something was happening behind my back. When I confronted her later, she told me a long story about her friend complaining about her boyfriend. It seemed like an odd explanation given everything I had just overheard, but I let it go for the moment, not wanting to accuse her without evidence. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. The changes in Emily weren't just emotional, they were financial too. I started noticing the subtle shifts in her behavior, not just in how she treated me, but also in how she approached our finances. It wasn't the usual discussions we had about savings, vacations, or even things like household bills. It was as though something had clicked inside her, and suddenly she was obsessed with securing everything. One evening, we were having dinner, the usual quiet hum of the house settling around us. Emily, normally chatty over dinner, was quiet that night. I watched her take small bites, her eyes flickering toward her phone screen every few seconds. It was when she casually mentioned, almost too casually, that maybe we should get our accounts and passwords in one place just in case. At first, it didn't strike me as alarming. After all, who wouldn't want to keep track of their finances in an organized manner? But the timing felt off. This wasn't the first time she'd brought up our accounts, but there was something different in the way she said it. We had never discussed our finances this way before. It wasn't part of our usual conversations, and I couldn't help but wonder why it was coming up now. She didn't seem to notice my confusion as she continued talking about what ifs. What if something happened to one of us? What if we needed to act quickly in a financial emergency? The more she spoke, the more my gut told me something was wrong. I pressed her a little, trying to sound casual, asking what kind of emergencies she was referring to. She paused, then shrugged with a vague response. Just life stuff. Her casual dismissal didn't help ease my unease. The urgency in her tone felt too rehearsed. Why now? Why the sudden push to merge everything, to make everything so accessible? My mind raced, jumping to conclusions. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe she was just being cautious. But deep down, something didn't sit right. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, I couldn't shake the conversation from my mind. I kept replaying it in my head. The way she acted so nonchalantly about something so serious. I tried to push the thought away, but it kept gnawing at me. Emily had always been the planner in our relationship, always thinking ahead. But this wasn't just about planning for the future. There was something covert about it, something hidden in the way she spoke. I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her joint account. I felt guilty almost immediately, like I was betraying her trust. But I couldn't help it. I needed to know. I didn't want to confront her without any proof, and I couldn't shake the suspicion that had taken root in my chest. At first, I didn't see anything alarming. There were the usual deposits from work, payments for bills, and the occasional grocery purchase. But then my eyes caught a few small, seemingly insignificant withdrawals, small amounts, nothing that would raise immediate red flags. But they didn't match up with our usual expenses. They weren't for bills or groceries, and the dates were spaced oddly apart. I hadn't noticed them at first, but now, with the knowledge of her sudden interest in our finances, they stood out like neon signs. Something wasn't right. I tried to convince myself that it was just a mistake, that maybe I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew that this was the first real sign that something was wrong. The withdrawals weren't large, but the fact that they didn't align with any of our regular expenditures felt intentional. I didn't want to confront her immediately, though. I needed to be sure, so I sat on it. The next few days were a blur of quiet tension. Emily was acting like everything was normal. Happy, upbeat, totally unaware of the thoughts running through my head. She continued to bring up the idea of consolidating our finances every few days, more casually each time. She would mention, "Oh, I just think it would be easier if we put everything together." I nodded along, not wanting to make things awkward, but inside, I was growing more and more suspicious. A few days later, I reached out to my old friend Mark, a lawyer. Mark and I had known each other since college, and although I didn't want to sound paranoid, I trusted him. I couldn't exactly go to him with all the details, but I needed advice on what to do next. I explained the situation as best as I could without revealing too much. I told him about Emily's repeated suggestions about consolidating our accounts, the strange withdrawals, and my growing concern. "You're not crazy for being cautious," he told me, his voice calm and reassuring. "If you think something's off, it's better to protect yourself now rather than regret it later." His words hit me hard. I had been second-guessing myself, thinking I was overreacting. But hearing Mark say that I wasn't being irrational gave me the clarity I needed. I wasn't sure exactly what I was preparing for, but I knew that I had to be ready for something. The more I thought about it, the more it felt inevitable. So I started making moves. I wasn't prepared to sit idly by while things slipped out of my control. I transferred some of my investments into a trust under my mother's name. It was the safest option I could think of, and at that point, I wasn't going to take any chances. I left just enough in our joint account to keep up appearances, to make it look like everything was still as it should be. But I knew I had to protect myself from whatever Emily was planning. I wasn't sure if she was being deceitful, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had to act. I couldn't wait until things got worse, until the betrayal, if it was coming, was already too far gone. Emily had always been the one to plan ahead, but this time I would be the one making sure that whatever happened, I wasn't left in the dark. Whatever this life stuff was, I was going to be prepared for it no matter what. Things seemed normal for a while after that. Emily went on as if nothing had changed, going about her daily routines with a smile. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. Her behavior was starting to feel like it had a hidden agenda, like a carefully constructed performance. The little cracks I had noticed before, the conversations about money, her phone always in hand, the odd hesitations in her speech, they were all small, seemingly inconspicuous moments, but they were starting to add up in my mind. I couldn't ignore the gnawing sense that something was off, even though outwardly everything appeared calm. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, when she came home one evening with an expression I'd never seen before, that I realized the truth. She was holding her keys in her hand, but there was a weight to her demeanor, something heavier than usual. She didn't greet me with the usual, "Hey, babe," or her easy smile. Instead, she stepped into the living room, dropped her bag by the door, and glanced at me with that unreadable look I'd come to dread. It was like a shift had happened suddenly. I wasn't sure if I knew her anymore. We were sitting on the couch, just watching TV. The low hum of the show we had on was in stark contrast to the silence that seemed to grow between us. I noticed how still she sat, too still. Normally, Emily was full of movement, laughter, and chatter. But tonight, she was quiet, her eyes fixed on the screen but unfocused, distant. I should have known something was wrong. I should have sensed it. But I didn't. Not until she turned to me, her eyes finally meeting mine. She took a deep breath, the way you might before delivering a difficult speech. And then she said the words that shattered everything. "We need to talk." My heart sank instantly. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them. Her voice was calm, unnervingly so. It was like she had planned every word, every pause. She wasn't trembling or angry. It was a controlled, measured calmness, like a decision had been made, and now she was simply delivering the result. I braced myself, the pit in my stomach deepening with each passing second. I could feel the tension building, the anticipation of something heavy, but I didn't expect what came next. "I think we should get a divorce," she said. The words hit me like a freight train. I couldn't even respond at first. I just stared at her, stunned, as if the air had been knocked out of me. Divorce? Just like that? It was as if she'd said something trivial like, "We need more milk," but the weight of the words couldn't have been more crushing. The world seemed to freeze. The silence between us was deafening. She continued, speaking as though we were discussing a minor inconvenience, not the end of a marriage that had once seemed so solid. "I just feel like I've lost myself in this relationship," she explained, her eyes not meeting mine but focusing on some far-off point as though she were speaking about someone else's life. "I've sacrificed so much for you, and I need to find who I am again." Her words felt rehearsed, like a script she'd memorized and was now delivering in the most detached way possible. There was no anger in her voice, no tears in her eyes, just a calm, almost clinical explanation of how she felt. I wanted to argue, to ask her what had happened. What changed in the months leading up to this, but something inside me knew this was more than just a simple emotional decision. This wasn't about her needing space or wanting time apart. It was something deeper, something more calculated. She kept going, seemingly unaware of the storm raging inside me. "You don't appreciate everything I've done. I deserve more." Those words stung harder than any physical blow could. I deserve more. In that moment, I felt the weight of everything I had worked for, everything I had tried to be in our marriage, unravel in front of me. I had given my all, I had sacrificed just as much, but somehow it wasn't enough. The love I had poured into our life, into her, had been dismissed so easily. At that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about her needing space. This wasn't some fleeting feeling that could be worked through. There was something more going on. Something that had been brewing beneath the surface for much longer than I had realized. I could see it now, clear as day. This was a calculated decision, not one made in the heat of the moment, but planned and executed with a cold, detached precision. I sat there, trying to process her words, but it was like trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. Everything I thought I knew about our life together was slipping through my fingers. I had to ask. I couldn't hold back anymore. "What do you mean? You deserve more? What more do you want? What has happened to us?" Emily's gaze softened for just a moment, but it wasn't out of sympathy. It was pity, the kind one gives when they've already emotionally detached from a situation. "I've done everything for you, Ryan. I've put my dreams on hold, I've sacrificed my career to support yours, I've been everything you needed me to be. But what about me? When do I get to have what I deserve?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always known Emily had put her dreams aside at times for us, for our family. But I didn't realize how deeply it had affected her. We had both made sacrifices, but now it seemed that everything I had thought was a mutual understanding was being used against me. She had become a martyr in her own eyes, convinced that her sacrifices had been undervalued and that it was time for her to claim something back. I thought back to all the little things I had done for her, the late nights I spent at work to ensure her comfort, the trips I had taken to make sure we spent time together, the compromises I had made in my own life for her happiness. But in her mind, none of that mattered. It was always about what she had given up, what she hadn't received in return. I could feel the anger rising inside me, the fury of knowing that everything I thought we had built together was now being torn down with these words, with the single decision she had made. So, you're telling me that after everything we've been through, everything we've built, you just want out? You want to walk away and leave all of this behind? I could barely keep my voice steady. Emily didn't flinch. She just nodded as if my anger were something that could be brushed aside. I need to find myself again, Ryan. I need to live my life for me. She paused for a moment before adding, you don't appreciate everything I've done. And frankly, I don't think you ever will. It wasn't just the words themselves. It was the cold finality in her tone. There was no room for negotiation, no second chances. It was as if she had already closed the door in her mind. I wasn't sure when the shift had happened. But in that moment, I realized that I had been living in a dream, thinking that our marriage was as solid as I had always believed. Now, that dream was crashing down, and I was left standing in the wreckage, unsure of where to go next. It was then that I understood. I was no longer part of her future. Whatever had happened in her mind to make this decision, it was clear that I no longer fit into her plans. And that was the hardest part of all. Not the divorce itself, but the realization that the person I had loved, the person I had trusted, had already moved on in her mind. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. The words, "I think we should get a divorce," echoed in my mind like a broken record. Relentless and unforgiving. My stomach churned every time they replayed in my head. How could she be so calm about it? I had spent so many sleepless nights trying to make sense of it all. The more I reflected, the more I realized the pieces of the puzzle weren't adding up. The timeline didn't make sense. The sudden shift in her behavior, the cryptic conversations, the withdrawal of affection. There had to be something more to this, something I wasn't seeing. The feeling of betrayal began to grow within me, eating away at my insides. I felt like I was spiraling into a darkness I couldn't escape. I had always trusted Emily, believed in our love, but now it felt like I was chasing shadows. There had to be more to the story, and I couldn't just sit around and let it slip away. I needed to know the truth. I had to know what she was hiding, and I wasn't about to let her shut me out without understanding the full picture. Then I found it. One afternoon, while she was at work, I made a decision. I was going to go through her social media. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was a step too far, that I shouldn't be violating her privacy. But the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach kept pushing me forward. My mind kept racing. If I didn't look, I might never have the closure I needed. I logged into her social media account, trying to remain calm. My fingers hovered over the screen for a few moments before I clicked through her photos and posts. First, I didn't find anything unusual, nothing that jumped out at me. But then, as I scrolled further down her timeline, I saw his name, Jake. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. Jake. The same name she had mentioned casually a few times over the past few weeks. He had been commenting on her posts, liking every picture, leaving supportive and encouraging words. I didn't think much of it at first, but as I started scrolling through the comments, something didn't sit right. This wasn't the kind of friendly interaction I'd expect from someone she barely knew. He was leaving thoughtful comments on all of her posts, comments that seemed far too intimate, too personal. It was more than just a passing, "Hey, looking good," or "nice picture." These were long, detailed messages, like someone who truly knew her, who cared more than just a casual acquaintance would. I clicked on his profile. He seemed normal at first, nothing out of the ordinary. Just another guy with a few mutual friends, some family photos, and the typical social media content. But then I noticed something strange. His posts were oddly close to hers, similar photos, similar places, comments that seemed coordinated, almost like they had shared experiences. As I dug deeper, my mind started racing. What kind of relationship did they really have? Had Emily been spending time with him outside of what she had told me? It wasn't until I went back to her tagged photos that everything started coming together. I found a picture she had posted from a cafe I had visited not too long ago when I overheard her mysterious conversation on the phone. In the picture, there she was, sitting at a table, smiling and sipping her coffee. And sitting across from her was Jake. He was there too, close but not touching. It wasn't overly intimate, but the proximity between them struck me. They looked at ease together, as if they had done this before, as if they were regulars. I had been in that exact cafe not long ago when I overheard her conversation, the one that sent a chill down my spine. She had told me she was meeting a friend, but I never thought it would be someone like him. Now, seeing them together in that picture, it all made sense. The secrecy, the hesitation when I asked about her plans. It was all coming together now. I stared at the picture for a long time, my pulse quickening. Everything I had suspected, everything I had quietly feared, was now undeniable. Emily wasn't just talking to Jake casually. They had been seeing each other more than she let on. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. The lies, the distance in our marriage, the sudden coldness, all of it pointed back to him. He was the reason for her behavior. I closed the laptop and leaned back, my mind reeling. I felt a mix of disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. The truth was right in front of me, but I wasn't sure what to do with it yet. I couldn't confront her until I had more proof. I didn't want to make accusations without being certain, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at the edge of something much bigger than I could have imagined. The next step was clear, but difficult. I needed to confront Emily directly. I needed to understand how deep this went and how long it had been going on. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger just yet. Not until I had more concrete evidence. There was still a part of me that wanted to believe this was all just a misunderstanding, that maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew that the truth was finally within reach. I spent the next few days in a haze. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen, what I had learned. Every moment felt like a slow burn, a torturous waiting game. I started to notice things in our daily life that I hadn't before. The way Emily's eyes would avoid mine when we spoke, the sudden extra hours she spent at work, the vague excuses she gave when I asked about her plans. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I knew that the confrontation was coming, but I wasn't sure how I would handle it when the time came. As the days passed, I prepared myself. I couldn't stop thinking about Jake and how Emily had been so secretive about their connection. Who was he really? Was he just a friend? Or was there something more? My gut told me it was more, but I needed confirmation. I couldn't let this go until I had all the facts. I couldn't help but feel like everything I had believed in was slipping through my fingers. Emily had been the love of my life, but now, with every piece of the puzzle falling into place, I was beginning to see her for who she had become. Not the woman I had married, but someone entirely different, someone I didn't fully know anymore. The trust that had once defined our marriage was now shattered, and the truth, painful as it was all I had left. I was on the brink of something I had never anticipated, an ending I wasn't prepared for. But as I looked back at the picture of Emily and Jake in the cafe, I realized that the end had already begun. And there was no going back. It wasn't long before I had confirmation. The weight of what I'd suspected for so long was starting to feel too real, too heavy. I couldn't shake the images of Emily and Jake from my mind. The more I replayed our conversations, the more the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. But it wasn't until I reached out to Lisa, one of our mutual friends, that everything I feared was confirmed. At first, she was hesitant, as though she was trying to protect Emily, but the hesitation in her voice only made it worse. Emily's been spending a lot of time with Jake, Lisa said quietly, as if speaking the words out loud would somehow make them real. He's been advising her on how to handle the divorce, on how to secure her future. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It was as if the floor beneath me had been ripped away. I'd had suspicions, yes, but hearing it confirmed was a different thing altogether. I could barely bring myself to respond. So it's true? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Lisa hesitated again, her voice soft but resolute. Ryan, I'm sorry. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but yeah, I think Emily's been planning this for a while. It's not just about her needing space. She's got a whole plan in motion. I couldn't believe it. All the signs had been there, and I had ignored them. Emily had been distancing herself, and I had chalked it up to stress at work, or maybe just the natural ups and downs of any long-term relationship. But now I saw the truth. She wasn't just trying to leave me. She was plotting everything with Jake, and I had been none the wiser. The weight of it crushed me. The woman I had loved for so long, the one I thought I knew better than anyone else, had been building a life with someone else in mind. It was as if the ground beneath my feet had turned to quicksand, and everything I had worked so hard to build was sinking around me. How had I not seen the signs? Every time she spoke about getting her life together or finding herself again, I had brushed it off, thinking it was just a phase, a midlife crisis, maybe. But now, it all made sense. It wasn't a phase. It was a plan. A cold, calculated decision she had made, with Jake's encouragement. I didn't know what to do with the information. Confronting her seemed like a given, but there was still a small part of me, a voice that barely whispered, urging me to tread carefully. Maybe I could still salvage something from this. But another part of me was screaming to demand the truth, to put an end to this charade once and for all. The final straw came when I discovered the full extent of her plans. It wasn't just the conversations or the whispers of a future with Jake. It wasn't just about her desire for space or self-discovery. No, this was about everything we had built together. Our house, our savings, the life we had shared for so many years. I remember the day the divorce papers arrived like it was yesterday. The envelope was thick, heavier than I expected. I knew something wasn't right from the moment I saw it. My hands shook as I tore it open, trying to steady my breath. The words inside were cold, precise, and the reality of what she was asking hit me hard. The papers weren't just asking for a fair split of assets, as I had hoped. They weren't some legal formality or a simple request for a peaceful resolution. No, she was demanding everything. Half the house, my savings, even my car. I felt a lump form in my throat. My head spinning as I read and reread the demands. Was this really happening? Was this the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had trusted above all else? She was trying to take everything, as though I were the villain in her story. I couldn't bring myself to look at the papers anymore. I dropped them onto the table and stood up, walking away from the mess, from the life that felt like it had suddenly shattered. The weight of the betrayal wasn't just about the divorce. It was about the life we had built together, the years of effort, love, and commitment. She was taking it all with the help of someone who had never been part of that life. I had worked so hard for everything we had, sacrificing pieces of myself along the way to provide for her, to build a future we could share. Now it felt like all that work was for nothing. The house we'd turned into a home, the vacations we'd taken, the plans we'd made for our future, it was all slipping away like sand through my fingers. And she was taking it with her as though it had never mattered. I could feel the anger building inside me. A slow burn that started in my chest and spread outward like fire in my veins. It wasn't just the divorce papers, it was the deceit, the betrayal, the fact that all these years, I had been living in a lie. She had been planning this with Jake the entire time, and I had been none the wiser. Felt like a cruel joke, and I was the punchline. I sat down at the table, my mind reeling. I couldn't think straight. The room was spinning. How had this happened? How had she become this person? Someone who could destroy everything we had with such cold indifference. How had I failed to see it coming? I had given her everything, and this was how it ended. With a signed piece of paper demanding the very last bit of my life. Every moment I had spent with her felt like a lie now, a betrayal in disguise. But no matter how deep the betrayal ran, I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't let her take everything. Not like this. Not without a fight. I wasn't going to go down without showing her that I was stronger than this. I had to protect what was mine, and I had to do it before she destroyed everything I had worked for. The truth was clear now. It was over, and I wasn't going to let Emily and Jake take what was rightfully mine. The mediation session was where everything changed. It was supposed to be a straightforward process, a meeting of minds to divide assets and finalize the divorce. But as soon as Emily's lawyer walked in, carrying a thick binder full of demands, I knew this wasn't going to be simple. There was a palpable sense of unease in the room. Emily's lawyer had this confident, almost smug look on his face, like he knew he was holding all the cards. It was all too familiar, the arrogance of someone who thinks they've already won. But I wasn't prepared to let that happen. I had my own set of documents ready, carefully prepared and strategically timed. As I handed them over to my lawyer, a slight tremor ran through me, not because I was nervous, but because I could feel the weight of the moment. Emily had been playing a dangerous game, and now, it was time to show her the hand I'd been holding. When Emily's lawyer looked at the documents inside the folder, his face went pale. I could see the color drain from his face, the confidence fading away. He stammered, fumbling with the papers, trying to piece together the reality of what he was reading. "The assets have already been moved," my lawyer said calmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "Everything is in a trust under Ryan's mother's name. The transfers were completed before the divorce was filed, and they are irrevocable." The silence that followed was thick with shock. Emily's lawyer just stared at the documents, his mind racing to process the sudden revelation. His eyes flicked from the papers to Emily, as if seeking some kind of explanation. But it was too late for explanations. "You planned this," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, looking at Emily in disbelief. I could feel my chest tighten, but I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth was right in front of us all. Emily had been caught in her own game, and there was nothing she could do about it now. The look on her face was enough to tell me she hadn't seen this coming. She had expected to walk into this mediation, make her demands, and walk out with a hefty portion of everything I had worked for. But instead, she was watching as her plans unraveled before her eyes. I could see her trying to keep her composure, but it was slipping. Her shoulders were tense, her jaw clenched, and her eyes darted around the room. It wasn't just anger that I saw in her. There was fear there too, a deep, visceral fear that I hadn't seen before. Emily was no longer in control. The confidence she had walked in with was gone, replaced by a helplessness that filled the room. I sat there, my hands resting calmly on the table, trying to keep my breathing steady. But inside, I could feel a rush of satisfaction. A quiet vindication. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when everything finally came to light. Emily's world was coming apart, and I had no sympathy left to offer her. She had shown me no mercy, so why should I offer her any now? As the mediator attempted to regain control of the situation, I could tell that Emily's lawyer was doing his best to salvage what was left of their position. But it was futile. There was no way out for them now. Emily had been outplayed, and the only thing left to do was accept it. The mediator glanced at me, then at Emily, and I could see the realization settle in. This wasn't going to be the smooth negotiation she had hoped for. This was a game changer, and now there was no going back. The final twist? It wasn't just about the assets anymore. It was about the future we had both envisioned, which had now become a shattered dream. Jake, the man she had leaned on for support, vanished as soon as he realized that there was nothing left for him in this scheme. He had played his part, helping her maneuver, but when the truth came out, he disappeared like a shadow fading into the night. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or disgusted by his absence. On some level, I felt betrayed by him too, but at the same time, it was clear that he wasn't part of the bigger picture anymore. Emily's plan had crumbled, and he was no longer a part of the fallout. As the divorce proceedings moved toward their conclusion, I could see Emily's demeanor shift even further. The woman who had been so sure of herself, so confident in her manipulation, was now a shell of the person I had once known. The lawyer quietly dismissed her claims, and the legal paperwork in front of her, the one that had once seemed so formidable, now felt like nothing more than a formality. In that moment, I realized that I had won not just the legal battle, but the emotional one. The peace of mind that came with knowing that I had protected myself, that I had outsmarted the people who had tried to take everything from me, was a victory I couldn't put into words. I could feel the weight of the last few months lifting off my shoulders. The stress, the anxiety, the constant wondering if I had done enough. It was all over. I had everything I needed, my house, my savings, and, most importantly, the freedom to move on. As Emily sat there, her world crumbling around her, I felt no need to gloat. There was no satisfaction in watching her fall apart. What mattered was that I was finally free. She had been a part of my life, a chapter that had lasted too long. And now that chapter was coming to a close. Emily was just a chapter from my past, and I was ready to write the next one. The weight of the future was no longer on my shoulders. I could feel the lightness in my chest, a freedom I hadn't experienced in years. The burden was gone, and with it I felt a sense of renewal and opportunity to rebuild, to grow, and to move forward. I stood up, feeling the gravity of the moment, but also the clarity that came with it. Emily wasn't my responsibility anymore. She was her own mess now, and I wasn't about to clean it up. As I walked out of that room, I left her behind, not with bitterness, but with the knowledge that I had protected myself, and in doing so, I had protected my future. The rest of my life was ahead of me, and it was time to start living it. What do you think about the story? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to drop a comment with your feelings or any feedback you have. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can be the first to hear the next one. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to bring you more amazing stories. Thank you so much for sticking around till the end, and I'll see you next time.